Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Burnout Podcast. My name is Skip O, and I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor today, Throttle and Thrive. Throttle and Thrive is a 6-bed facility in California. It's a men's substance misuse facility exclusively serving first responders and veterans. Throttle and Thrive can be reached at 805-701-1309. 805-701-1309. When you make that call, Siobhan Thompson will probably be the one answering. She's the CEO there. And then she'll ask you some questions. And then after you decided you want to change your life and you want to live life, she will personally come and pick you up at the airport once you fly out anywhere from the United States. So keep them in mind if you're out there or a family member's out there and they need some help, whether it's for addiction, mental health, or whatever the case may be. Please go to throttleandthrive.com. Check them out for more information. Thank you. We're here today with a special guest. His name's Morgan. Pronounce your last name for me. Is it Englund like it sounds?
Yeah.
Okay, duh. Well, Morgan, once I was a firefighter, and you have to walk me through things. Well, Morgan,
Yeah.
I tell you, I appreciate you coming on and sharing a little bit of your story. And hopefully your story is going to spark somebody else to reach out if they need some help. But you want to tell a little background about yourself, just a little bit of background, give people some information, and then we'll come up with some questions and go from there. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Great to be here, Skip. Appreciate the opportunity, and it's going to be fun to chat. So, I'll just start. I'll start with my first responder experience. I got onto the fire department at 40. I'd been a paramedic for 5 or 6 years before that. And I did 14 years as a firefighter paramedic with LA City. And after 14 years, or 13 and a half, 14 years, I just walked away. And I think there were some things. I was very unhappy. I was really depressed, really angry, bitter, burnout. Burnout's perfect for this podcast because that's that encapsulates the whole thing, really. And after I left, I didn't really have a plan. I just knew that I couldn't do this anymore because I was watching myself die slowly.
Sure.
And so about 2 years after I left, I really hit the bottom. I was just driving one day, didn't know where I was going, and just couldn't see the next day. Couldn't see myself alive tomorrow. I didn't have any plans or anything like that, but it's the weirdest thing to try to explain. I just couldn't picture tomorrow. I felt like detached from the world. My mom actually called me while I was driving, and out of the blue. I mean, she hadn't called me in years probably, and she heard my voice. And anyway, long story short, she got me to come over to her house, and she basically kind of saved my life that day. I have a feeling, and it was a long journey back from that day. That was kind of the bottom, and then each day after that was just kind of climbing out of the hole one step at a time. And it took several years and several modalities. I tried different things like sound meditation and psychedelics and yoga and meditation and just spiritual ways to try to reconnect and just get myself back. My goal was to live in a state of joy and happiness and gratitude when I left the department. And I feel like I've achieved that. I'm happier and more centered and clear about who I am. And so I did all this healing, and then I got into, I always wanted to get into public speaking. Not always, but after I left the fire department, it came up. And
Sure. Let me, before you get into that, let me ask you just a few questions. First of all, I'm glad you're still on this earth. I want to tell you that.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. But you say you had 14 years on, and that's as a medic and a firefighter. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Is there through that, I know how the, going on those runs, the EMS runs, especially where you're at. I think you guys are a little bit busy, weren't you?
You might say that, yeah.
Yeah, I figured, a lot of, I talked to different departments, different police officers, depending where city where you're at. Somebody's busy is different from another busy. Somebody might get 2 calls a day or whatever. Other people don't get back to the station.
Yeah.
Is there anything like, you're on these runs, whether it's fire, EMS, is there any, a few of those runs that stick in your mind? I'm not asking you to describe it. Was there like something you could look back and pinpoint where you started seeing because of these runs or the job?
Honestly, the runs that I went on, their significance compared to, how do I put this? For me, it was much more the culture, what I was exposed to in the firehouse at certain times, not all the time, but a lot of it. Sort of the mentality is just to break you down, look for a weakness, exploit it, and just, needle. It's kind of like, I know how to throw a fucking ladder. I don't need to prove it every time I come to work,
Sure.
Like, let's move on from this. But, it's just that kind of thing, the daily tearing down of the soul. And what's so crazy about it is that we all think we're joining this brotherhood, and I think the realization that it's anything but that. Let me qualify that. I think there are some departments, especially smaller ones, where you can't get away with that kind of culture,
sure,
tearing each other down. And there are different stations. And when you have more people in one station, like a task force house, you obviously have a lot more of that testosterone and the challenging and stuff, which is all good. It's all good to be challenged all the time, but let's keep elevating, that thing about being kind of torn down. We go on these calls, right? You go on these calls, a 10-year-old shot and waiting for the school, a little 6-year-old run over by her grandfather, fucking all of it.
Yeah.
And then you come back to the station, and what you're dreading is coming back to the station and just having to take it. And I think all of it together was the thing. But for
sure,
me, the calls are far outweighed by the experience I had in many places, all throughout my career, before the fire department, as a paramedic, even as an intern as a paramedic. I saw this, and it's just, you can see why we're having the issue with first responders having mental health issues, and then letting it spiral down to the point where they're, thinking about suicide. If we had had this brotherhood, if we talked about something other than hunting or RVs or, fishing or roof construction, mechanics, we could talk about other things. We'd find out more about each other. But I think if we engage with other people, if we show vulnerability or we talk about their vulnerability, then we have to expose it in ourselves.
Sure.
And so we're not willing to do that. So we just walk by each other. This guy might be walking by you and he's on his way home to fucking put a gun in his mouth and end his life.
Yeah.
You'll never know.
Well, I tell you, Morgan, I can relate with you. There's some, I could go on runs and deal with that, but there was some when I got called in or I got subbed out to another station and I'd find out who works there. I go, oh my God. And I dreaded it because I knew how it was going to be. Now I'm no angel. I don't want to paint the picture. I'm an angel. I got in there sometimes and did it too, but, I remember, I don't think I ever drove anything or regretted people to work with me. I always like to have fun and I try to support people, but there's guys on there and not just guys, ladies, that would, mostly guys that would just regret that you even showed up because they're going to be sarcastic. They're going to hammer you. They're going to whatever, like you just said, you described it perfectly, but, okay, moving forward now. You had all this stuff happen and you're figuring out, and I'm not guessing, I'm not trying to read your mind. How can I put this puzzle together so I can go and share my story with a department, with an organization? And is that what we're trying to do now or you're trying to do now?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get into public speaking. I'm a songwriter and stuff, and I've heard about this thing where you can, if you call yourself a keynote speaker, you're getting paid thousands of dollars. If you call yourself a musician, you're getting 200, maybe free lunch, So this guy, and he's sort of like the kumbaya camp singer guy, and he has this seminar, and he said, what I do is I'm a keynote speaker. I'll do a 10-minute, 12-minute story, and then play one of my songs to cap the story, then do another story, another song. So he intermixes song and story. So when I left the fire department, I went through that seminar that he had, but I was in no way ready. And then about a year ago, I got an ad over Facebook saying, if you want to write a TEDx talk, we're the people, this company coaching thing. And so I bought into that. And as I started writing the talk, you write different up stories and down stories, and there's different parts of the talk, so you practice it. And I was using some of the stories to support my main point, which was about connecting through kindness. But as I did that in the talk practices, the overwhelming response was, you have to tell that story, the real story, the story about what you experienced there. And I'm like,
sure,
no way, that's not me. I'm not doing that. Kept my mouth shut. I'm not that guy. I'm not going to tell the secret behind the uniform or anything like that. But I finally I woke up one morning and I thought, well, let me just see if anybody's talking about mental health and first responders. And I found the statistic, found a couple people, but I found the statistic that more first responders die by suicide than any other cause. Well, certainly than are killed in the field. And I have to really confirm that about any other cause. But anyway, it's still a stunning statistic.
Sure.
And, finding out that there are thousands of people going through this, which I experienced in my own way. I lost 3 friends while I was on the job to suicide. And, it's a real thing. We don't talk about it. We don't want to know about it. And so with that knowledge, with that statistic alone, I said, okay, I need to, if I can help one person save one life or help one person climb out of that hole, then hopefully telling my story will help that, because that's what happened to me. That's why I'm sitting here talking to you right now. First guy I met was a guy named Robert Arrieta. I saw his story about his PTSD on YouTube. The first thing when I looked out, and I reached out to him, I found his number, found the department, and we connected, and he's connected me to other people. And so it is this brotherhood that's forming of people that are just like, they're done with the bullshit,
Sure.
We're human beings, we're not firemen, or we're susceptible to disease, injury, mental health issues, all of it, just like everybody else. And we think we're separate, but we're not. And so what we do is you just take it all and we just shove it inside, and then that becomes cancer and heart disease and diabetes. And, by the time you finally retire, you got 5 shitty years left before you die, So we can change that and really add purpose and joy and get people living at a high frequency. That's what I'd like to be part of.
No, that's good stuff. I tell you, when you talked about the environment you came from, you hit the nail on the head. It was right there. The emotions you go through, the thing, then falling through what you're speaking, and you're very good at articulating words. That's not me. But, I think everybody has a piece of puzzle. When we all come together, the old saying, see the bigger picture. And a lot of people, when I don't know about you, when I share emotions, I'm better with it, but I feel very vulnerable and uncomfortable. I do not like it, especially if I cry, I feel weird. I just feel weird. But later on, give me another hour or two, man, it's refreshing. It's like, man, I needed to do that. Man, I'm glad I did that. But man, it's hard, especially to come in front of people and do public speaking and sharing your story. And you might have some days oh man, I'm going to cry. Oh, or I can tell the story thing. Everybody's a little bit different, but just your demeanor, how you carry yourself and telling your story, man, I think there's a lot of people going to reach out for you. And I think there's people listening right now that need to have a purpose. And that's, I think, when you tell your story, you're giving them a purpose, give them some ideas, and you're showing right there by people reaching out to you and telling what you had to do. Now, do you do any therapy, or have you done any like that's called EMDR or anything like that?
No, I'll tell you what I did do, but I just want to say that as far as telling the story, when one of the guys that I got connected to, Anthony connected, Robert connected me with Anthony, who was our connection.
Yeah.
And he and I hadn't really talked. He got through to me in a weird way through my songwriter thing. And I was like, who is this guy? But he's like, I want to connect you with my partner, Brian.
Yeah.
And so he and I finally talked, and it was a Wednesday, and we talked for like 20 minutes, and we just hit it off right away. And I said, well, dude, so they're starting this retreat for first responders called Runestone Ranch near Livermore, California. And I said, dude, I'm in. What's the next step? I'd love to be part of this. And he goes, well, we're having our first meeting of the cohort, the peers and people that are going to be part of this, including the construction and, all of it. All the people are going to be there this weekend. Starts tomorrow. I said, dude, I'll be there. So I threw everything in my car and went up there. And that first night, everyone kind of gathered. We had a good dinner, and then we went out around the fire pit. And I don't know how it started, but so we were just kind of introducing ourselves, telling a little background, but these stories started coming out, and people were these big, strong, heroic people, and tiny little women were, one by one, we were just telling our story. And as each person, the tears were coming, the feeling of brotherhood, the feeling of unity was just so powerful. And, it didn't matter. Tears, so what? It's just fucking fluid. So we're filled with fluid,
Sure.
And it just, to me, to be able to have emotion and, it's like when you have to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom and then you go about your day, right?
Yeah.
If something's happening, rather than just holding it in and like being, oh God. This is a great analogy, though. This is a great analogy. I never thought about it before, but it's like taking a shit. You got all this stuff in, and you never let it out, ever. So, it's like,
that's
take
great.
A shit, man, and get back to work, We do it all the time. Let's do it with our emotions, too, if you need to. That's the thing, we know our job. We can do our job. Showing vulnerability, showing humanity, it's the people that can't do that are the weak people. It's the people that have courage and are ready to stand up and freaking lay down their life for somebody else. Those are the people that I think that I'm sorry, but I feel like it takes more courage to have emotion and, at least acknowledge it, even if you're not crying right at that moment, but to at least acknowledge it in some way. But to just say, I don't have emotion, I leave it at home. I leave it on the off ramp to the freeway on my way to work. That's, we're selling ourselves short by doing that. And those days are over, man. It's not, that doesn't make you tough. It makes you weak, I think. That's just
No, I agree. I know what you're saying, because I remember when I used to work out all the time, I was in the karate and I got in some tough man contests, and I did all that because I was keeping people away from me. I mean, I was scared inside. If I would be gut wrenching honest, I was a lot bigger than I am now. I was a lot stronger than I am now, and I knew a little bit, enough to get me in trouble. But doing all that stuff, at the job, going into fire, doing stupid things, ego driven, big time. Wanted to always talk about who. Oh, do you see me? Telling stories about myself. I get what you're saying. I was probably the most, at any given time, the most scared person in a room, because I did all those things because I was afraid. I was afraid to share and stuff. I didn't know how to, and I didn't want. And I was so much caught up what people thought about me, which I don't let that run my life so much anymore. But I get what you're saying about that. Yeah. And when I saw somebody up there, and for the first time, when I came to this 12-step program, the guy that was helping me, he was telling a story up in front of people, and he started crying. And I was like, I wish I could do that. I wish I could have that much courage. So I get exactly what you're talking about.
Was your first thought, what a pussy?
With him? No. When I got to that gut-wrenching thing where when I got down to deep to my heart, to my soul, and I wanted to change my life, I did not want to, I think you used the analogy, you said it was okay if you didn't live tomorrow. I used to carry a gun with one bullet in it, and I wanted to get the courage, my so-called courage, not to be in this world anymore. But what I needed is that kind of courage when somebody shows their emotions. I needed somebody like yourself to be able to say those words, to articulate emotions into words. Okay, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do right there. I want to feel. I want to cry. I want to say I don't have all the answers. I want to say, why did this happen? I get mad or angry because these runs or whatever. Just like you were saying, before I was a little kid, I had issues. When I got on the job, I had the same issues. But you just not hit a nerve. You just flip the switch like, man, I can relate to that stuff.
Well, it's true. And I think we all have such insecurities, and that's what we're trying to hide. And when we can expose those insecurities and be vulnerable and acknowledge that we all have them, none of us is perfect. They say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And if you're
that's good. I like that.
Right? Because what's the point of being here? If you're so being able to at least acknowledge that you're human, that you're not perfect, and that you're not this hero. You have it. We do a job, man. It's like whether it's plumbing or mechanic or it's a blue collar job, and it's fun as hell, and we get to do all kinds of fun things. And but at the end of the day, it's a job. The civilians, they call me up when there's a fire, like, oh, I saw the fire. Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, this is what we do. This is our job. We don't run into fires thinking we're going to die. We go in there. We know what we're doing. We have our SOGs and all that stuff, and we do our job. And so once you have got a pretty good foundation at your job, then we don't need to keep doing that and proving it and seeing if you can handle it. I think in the military, boot camp, right? They try to break you down and then build you up. They build you up. And I think a lot of times in the first responder world, what's missing is that part, the building up part.
Sure.
They can tear it down. They're great at that. But it's building up, and in building other people up, supporting other people, lifting other people up is seen as a weakness, as seen as a negative. Like you don't do that, and you don't talk about yourself, and you just there's all kinds of little rules, and there are reasons for them. But what I'm seeing today, that now that we know that people are literally killing themselves after working, straining, surviving, suffering, sacrificing to get the best job in the world, there is something wrong.
Sure.
It'd be, so if that statistic is true, that more first responders die by suicide than are killed in the line of duty in one of the most dangerous jobs you can have, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
We need to do something about that.
Well, I think you're on this podcast. You're working with Anthony and Brian on the retreat. Now, not to jump a subject, when you was talking to Anthony and Brian, did they have an idea for you to come in there and talk, or is that what the thing that you were thinking about doing?
We didn't know, man. I didn't know. I had no idea. It was kind of for me to see. I think they're kind of looking for peers and,
Sure.
peer support during the thing, but also, who's going to help build the cabins and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And who's in, who's going to be part of it. And it was just kind of to see each other. However, while I was up there, Brian really put me on the spot. He showed my talk that I did, the thought leader talk that I did. So we all watched that on the big screen. And I also did a sound meditation for them, which I want to tell you about.
Sure.
That was one of the biggest thing in my healing, like transition, for me. So Yeah, but it wasn't about like doing peer work. It wasn't about that. It was just about meeting each other,
That's good.
seeing who each other was and everything. And it organically happened that we had this incredible like peer support group session, without meaning to. It just happened. And it just really showed me how when you speak to somebody that's walked in your shoes, has your similar life experiences, the conversation's just completely different. Talk to a civilian or somebody that hasn't done this job, you could tell them about it. They have no fucking clue what you're talking about, what you experienced. They just don't, and so you can't really relate. And are you going to really pour your heart out to somebody that is not going to have a clue what you're talking about?
Being a firefighter at EMT and being on the medic, I can tell you, hey, I worked a code today on a little kid, and you'll just, I get it. I get it. And we don't have to explain, and you never, and just to let anybody know, you don't want to ever, hey, what's your worst run? So you want me to revisit the thing that really drove me to drinking, shooting up coke, and about blowing my brains out. And They don't know. They don't know, though. And that, I think education, if we do it in the right way, and I try not to be sarcastic in that, I never answered that way to people, but you caught my interest, though, sound meditation. Can you go into that more for me?
Yeah, absolutely. But I just want to tell you, though, usually when somebody asks me that, I tell them about a story where I made this little old lady a pot of tea and we drank it together.
That's cool.
At like 4 a.m, like that's a call that I'll never forget because it really made a difference. But anyway, so I had been trying different things for healing, and I was making progress, but my sister noticed that I was, we kind of came together. We hadn't talked in 10 or 12 years. And as we started to get to know each other again, she realized that I had some real issues, some phobias and things. It was just hyper awareness, just always looking. And she just goes, man, you got issues. I said, whatever. So anyway, she called me and said, hey, show up at this address tomorrow at 2:00. And just go there, wear comfortable clothes. And so I did. I showed up at this house and knocked on the door, and there's a guy, kind of looked like you, except his beard was black. And he was an Israeli guy, and just a really cool guy, full-on guru-looking dude. But it turns out that he's ex-Israeli special forces. So he got into this because he had his own issues. Anyway, so he says, we're going to do a sound meditation today. I said, okay. So we talked for a while, and then he gave me, I don't know how much, magic mushrooms in little capsules. Mm-hmm. And then he gave me MDMA, and he told me about both and what they do and why. The MDMA specifically, they're using ketamine, which apparently is nowhere near as good as MDMA because it disables your fear center in your amygdala. So let's say if you're going to have a traumatic event come up, your amygdala will shut it down because it doesn't want to experience that all over again. So the whole point of this is that you take that and you do some breathing and stuff, and then he'll start doing the drum, buffalo drum or something, and just, you're like, whoa. And it's a series of overtonal, percussive, and drone instruments that are played one at a time. And each one, and there's about 2 minutes or so in between each of silence, just quiet. And so when I went through this thing, it lasted about 5 hours, I think. And each instrument was like ripping a layer of the onion off. I could feel it happening. My body went through things like almost convulsions, like a seizure, where it was shaking. All my muscles were just clenched for 45 minutes, an hour, and just shaking, like just riding out this turbulence. And then eventually it would my hands would unclench, my body would relax. You're playing the same tones, but I don't have the charge is gone. It's just gone. And at one point I felt, I think with the gong, it was just really intense. and I saw this Rolodex, almost like a Rolodex of faces in my head, just whatever I'm seeing.
Sure.
And I just knew that it was death. It was death leaving my body as these. I didn't have any connection to the faces. It wasn't anything. It just, and also my body was going, when my body was doing that, my mind was completely separate and still. It was like I was watching myself from afar go through this, my body going through this. And it was mind blowing to see what was coming out of me. And so anyway, that whole thing, and it ends, and it just feels, you just can't believe what just happened that night. And then the next morning, my life was completely different, completely changed to this day. I mean, there's ups and downs.
Sure.
But, it was 95% of everything was gone. One of the phobias that I developed was flying, being in a tube, a aluminum tube at 35,000 feet with no way out and no control of the situation I couldn't even fathom that. I've flown hundreds of times, but I got to that point. And the next morning I really wanted to take my little daughter to Kauai because it's one of my favorite places. Mm-hmm. I just booked a flight. I said, I'm just going to white knuckle it. I didn't even know about this sound meditation. And I booked the flight and I said, we're just going to do it. And that was the next morning at 6:00 in the morning. I picked her up and I was fine. Like just looking out the window going, yeah, I mean, I could die. Wing could fall off, but I wasn't in an almost state of panic the whole time, sure, which I was the last 2 times I flew. And, so it was a profound, healing experience. The guy that did it for me, he went through it with the guy that designed it, this guy named Alexandre Tenus. He's an ethnomusicologist, a Harvard professor. He's the whole history of music all over the world, especially ancient music and Persian, and cymatics, spectral or fractal geometry, all this stuff, how it works together. So I went and trained with both of them in New York. I took my son, and we went and trained with them to be able to do this. And I wanted to do it for other first responders. And so I'm trained in that. And the sound alone it has its own thing. But this is, if you want to do deep work, if you want to just rip it out, and then get to a place where you can really start healing and living, it's like getting all this weight. It's like taking a big shit, getting it all off you. And then, then you're like, okay, now let's get busy. It's like, I don't know. It's like cleaning yourself out, getting rid of all this weight and this darkness and feeling light and ready to face the world and see what's next and be excited and curious.
One time I remember what's relating in my mind when you're describing that is a spiritual awakening. You just like the shell's broke and you're connected with everything. And if you believe, it just connected the light. It's like, I know I'm in the knowing. If that makes any sense, I'm not.
No, it absolutely does. Especially that I'm in the knowing. Yes, that's very true. It's like a peek behind the curtain. That's another aspect of it, of how small this little world that we're living in right now is. It lets you see the big picture, and not only how small you are in it, but how important and vital you are as part of it.
That's cool. Okay. Here's what I do with everybody that comes on here. Morgan, there is somebody out there that's listening to you right now. Listen to us. It could be a firefighter, police officer, somebody in a mission overseas. It could be a emergency room staff and they just don't know which direction to go. They might be thinking about suicide, drinking too much or whatever. You got 30 seconds. What are you going to say to them? Go.
I'm going to say, if you're really struggling, and a lot of your struggling is because you're doing it alone, you're just keeping it inside, you're cheating yourself, because there is this amazing world of people out here, brave people, that have gone through the same thing you're going through. and they're out here for you. And I'm one of them, and Skip's another one of them. And man, here we are with open arms. So you are not alone. There's a lot of love out here for you. Just reach out, take a step, have the courage.
That's awesome. Yeah, if you want to connect with Morgan, go to burnoutnetwork.org. Send us a message and we'll forward it to Morgan and he'll get a hold of you. What is your website? Let's everybody know what your website and they just get a hold of you directly.
Well, yeah, I've got a couple. So morganenglund.com is my Englund as it's spelled there.
Gotcha.
Morganenglund.com, that's my music website. I'm also, my son and I started, it's called Mystic Harmonies. And if you want to book a session or see what that's about, we'll do like a 15-minute Zoom thing for you. And you can get a taste of it. And there's all kinds of ways we can go with that, all the way to the one I explained to from just a 15, 45-minute to hour sound journey. So that's at mysticharmonies.com. And if you want to get in touch with me about speaking or podcast or anything, morganenglund.com.
That's cool, man. I tell you what, thank you for coming on here. But one more thing, I always ask the guests, is there a certain song, a verse, or a quote when you're going through your stuff that kind of resonates in your mind when you do that?
Yes. Always the first one that comes to mind is from the epic movie called Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And it's a quote by Bill S. Prescott, Bill S. Esquire, whatever his name.
That's cool. I got you.
Be excellent to each other, right?
Yeah, that's good, man.
Be excellent to each other. If we could all do that, man, this world would be a whole different place.
I like that. That's cool. That brought me way back. Well,
right?
I appreciate you coming on here. And I want to just remind everybody, hey, the Burnout Network, if you go to burnoutnetwork.org on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, there's a support group on there. You're welcome to come on. There's no judgment. We get in there. Just like me and Morgan's talking today, that's what we do. Also on the Worldwide Peer Support, you go to worldwidepeersupport.org on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. They have a support group too. First responders just like us, we just share a little bit, and if you need any resources, we'll help you get there too. But Morgan, man, brother, you did great, man. I can't wait to come and see you speak at this big conference that's going to happen in your future.
Oh wow, I hope so. I hope it does. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Everybody, go home tonight, shut your phone off and shut your scanner off and get some sleep.